Welcome to the Get Real Podcast, your high-octane boost of full-on reality therapy for personal, business, and investing success with your host, Ron Phillips, because somebody's got to tell it like it is.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Get Real Podcast. Ron Phillips here. My gosh, I might get in trouble today. I'm not exactly sure. As you probably have determined at this point, I'm not a huge fan of government regulation, what I would consider to be overreach of our government. And it's been on pretty much full display. And so I want to talk about that. I want to talk about it with respect to zoning. There's a great article in the Wall Street Journal. It's called How Zoning Ruined the Housing Market in Blue State America. Now, I don't think only in Blue State America, but this is specifically geared towards that. And I've been on the show over the past several months talking about affordable housing, which is almost a joke at this point. The fact that we have politicians even saying affordable housing in this, like, I don't know how we let them get away with pontificating about affordable housing when they don't even know what they're talking about. I don't think they know what an affordable house is. I don't think they realize that construction costs, land costs in almost every area of the country at this point don't allow for affordable housing. The only way to build it is for the government to give, tax credits or in some way incentivize the construction of it, because it doesn't make any financial sense whatsoever to build. The building costs are too high. But let's talk about one of the things that makes this so high. And I'm going to utilize this article. So Ron didn't say it. This article said it, but I do happen to agree with it. So to give credit where credit is due, Governor Gavin Newsom did something extraordinary for a progressive politician. He took aim at regulations. And I think he did that because he got a whole bunch of pressure to do it, but that's beside the point. In an executive order designed to help residents rebuild, Newsom suspended environmental reviews, told state agencies to identify rules that might impede construction, and instructed bureaucrats to rush any necessary permits through the process. The measures, Newsom explained, were made necessary by the loss of thousands of homes in a city already suffering a housing crisis. And there we have it. If there's a crisis, we can maneuver out of these ridiculous regulations. But I would submit we do have a crisis. It's called, we don't have enough houses. We can't affordably build them. And you, sir, and all of the other politicians just seem to get in the way. It raised a troubling question. If the only way to rebuild was to suspend the regular rules, why were those rules there in the first place? It's just such a great question. The answer is that the rules were intended to make it impossible to build. That is the reality of the situation. This has taken generations to make happen. It is called Not in My Backyard, NIMBY, across the country. When we stop building homes where people want to live, Americans lose the chance to move toward opportunity. In a properly functioning economy, workers relocate to find better paying jobs in faster growing industries. In the U.S. today, workers instead often remain stuck where they are. As recently as 1970, 1 in 5 Americans moved each year. But after half a century of steady decline, the census announced in December that we had set a dismal new record with scarcely 1 in 13 people relocating to a new home, largely because they can't relocate to a new home because they can't afford to buy the new home. Now, zoning is not the only issue, but this is a big one. And because of what Newsom did in California, it underscores the reality of the situation, which is there is very little need for so many regulations. Okay, we need some regulations, but we don't need so many regulations that you literally can't build anything. Now, it's not just a problem for those who are stuck. It costs us, the American taxpayers, By one estimate, lowering the GDP by $1.8 trillion per year. Perhaps nowhere is this more acute of a problem than it is in California, where people have been moving out now more than they've been moving in for years. Now, California's got plenty of people, not that big of a deal. But there are warning signs. Inside of a business, you look for KPIs, and you look for the KPIs that warn you that there's a problem or a kink in the hose, so to speak. California's had a kink in the hose for decades. This is such a great article. You should get it and read it. It goes through the history of zoning, and that it was to keep people in their location, right? So you got rich people over here, you got poor people over here. I think, probably back before there was some reforms, it was probably designed to keep certain classes, certain colors where they were supposed to be. I mean, these days, it's probably less about race. It's more about social class and poverty. When you do that and you don't allow people to move where there's opportunity, it creates pockets where there isn't that much opportunity. And it also does something interesting. I've talked to several restaurants here there's an affluent place in Charleston where it's almost impossible to set up any kind of what do you call not a fast food restaurant? It's like the tier above fast food. It's kind of fast, but it's not like a sit down for 2 hours. It's hard to find people to work those jobs because they have to commute in. They can't afford to live where those jobs are. So it's very difficult to open those types of restaurants, which the people want, but you can't fill the jobs because the people can't afford to live there, and they now can't afford to commute there either. It's kind of a problem. And this is kind of what we're talking about here, is that this regulations by zoning, they're kind of a scheme to control all of that. But there's unintended consequences every single time this happens. Okay, so for a century, California had grown at an astonishing rate, giving new opportunities to successful wave of arrivals. Now its residents, influenced by activists like Ralph Nader, I don't know if you guys are even old enough to remember Ralph Nader, concluded that growth itself was a problem. So in the 1970s, the state passed new laws mandating extensive review and permitting processes and giving the public broad rights to weigh in and challenge the decisions. Okay, so now we not only have the zoning laws that they put in place, but now we also have the public who's been given rights to layer on top of the zoning rights to challenge any decisions that have been made. So first wave, we have zoning. Second wave, we have this tool of planning. So now we have planning and zoning. And then those processes that are typically done behind closed doors now became open to the public. And the third layer is now we have the public that gets to weigh in. A whole bunch of people who have literally no idea what they're talking about, they get to weigh in as well. We need to fix these antiquated rules, which have long functions as tools of privilege. I hate to say it, but I kind of agree. Now there seems to be some kind of bipartisan consensus, and I think that's largely because of this wildfire, where you have a whole bunch of wealthy people who were then going to get put through the same process that they had instituted for themselves so that they didn't have anybody who was able to move into their neighborhood. Now, all of a sudden, we can get rid of these regulatory requirements, and we've got bipartisan agreement. We need to build more units and clear away some of the outdated laws and regulations that have made it harder to build homes for working people. Barack Obama. So, I don't think any of this means that we need to scrap like all of the rules. I don't think it means that we need to just turn developers loose to do whatever the hell they want. But it does mean that we need to have some simple, clear regulations. I think we should always look at the environment, but we also need to look at the livability of neighborhoods. And then we need to look at wealthy areas and poor areas. And we kind of need to have a level playing field so that the builders know what to expect and they don't get I keep getting posts from my friend. I need to have him on the show. I think I will. But I'm going to cut out to one of his posts. This is hilarious in a really bad way. He says, case in point, the sewer district wants a 500-gallon grease trap on a donut store that doesn't have a commercial kitchen. Okay, now, so let's just process that for a second. My friend has built a very nice brand new commercial facility. He's got a tenant. The tenant wants to open a donut store that does not have a commercial kitchen. In other words, they're not making donuts. Okay? But the sewer district wants to have a 500-gallon grease trap. Reason? Well, you might sell that building to a Chick-fil-A sometime, and they're going to need a grease trap. I mean, so tens of thousands of dollars for no purpose. When good intentions go astray and overregulation clouds common sense, the consumer pays the price. And it absolutely does. So you want to know why? One of the reasons why housing is unaffordable? Right there. There's zero reason for that. They bake the donuts off-site in a main kitchen facility. They deliver them citywide to all of their stores. And the sewer district is forcing this guy to put in a 500-gallon grease trap. Unbelievable. Next post. Fire district needs $96,000 to review blueprints for an apartment complex. 3 out of the 4 buildings are identical. Took them almost 5 months to review because they were too busy and no outside engineer was used. $96,000. Well, who paid that? Whoever's buying those apartment buildings. Because the apartment buildings cost $100,000 more, guess what? The rent's going to cost more. You add up $96,000 in a multi-million-dollar deal is not that big of a deal. But it's one thing out of a whole laundry list of BS that builders and developers have to go through for no reason. There's no reason for it. Why does it take 5 months? That 5 months, by the way, he's paying on the money that he's using to build the apartment complex. In addition, it all adds up. It all flows downhill. So this zoning thing it's a bigger deal, I think, than people realize. And it's not the only thing. I mean, there's regulations in how we get all of the products that we get for building. There's so many things that go into increasing the price. This is only one of them. So I guess what I would suggest, what I would implore that we all do is that when we're voting in our next election, that we're listening to people, listening to what they say. Sometimes things sound really, really good when they're a soundbite. They sound less good in actuality. I say this all the time. I'm going to get in trouble with the dog people right now, but I like to say that the idea of having a dog versus the actuality of having a dog are remarkably different because of all of the work and effort that goes into having the dog. I think in the idea of having the dog, there's love, there's all of the things, and you really do get that in actuality, but you get all of the other stuff in actuality too. The puke on your brand new carpet and all of the other things that go along with having a dog, especially a puppy. It's very similar here. There's a whole lot of unseen that goes with everything that is passed. So our buddy Newsom, he has hit upon the right answer. I think he had to do it so reluctantly. But if paring back a century's worth of rules and regulations is the right way to rebuild after a fire, it's the right way to build, period. It's the most important step we can take to restore the country's lost social mobility and give Americans more control over their destinies. And yes, even the ability to own the American dream. Which is interesting because I saw another post the other day, a very famous individual who preaches that you should rent properties because they're horrible investments. threw out this absurd number that house prices, they just don't appreciate that much anyway over time, which is absurd on its face. And incidentally, he owns houses now too. He doesn't just rent houses. While your personal residence doesn't produce income necessarily, I guess, unless you have an ADU and you rent out some space. I can't tell you how many clients that we talk to who are millionaires literally just because they bought and owned a property or several properties. And in my lifetime, which has seen two downturns, one massive historical downturn, it doesn't matter. Over time, owning homes personally, outside of the investments that I hold separately, has been an amazing store of wealth. I would have received no wealth from the rental payments that I would have been paying. So I'm gonna have to disagree. So it seems to be that this is like the Facebook post episode. But get out there and make sure you get your voices heard. Really read through what the regulations are going to be, what they're going to do. And even if you like them, if they put limits and restrictions on the private use of property, my opinion, folks, not probably the best thing. Not probably the best thing. Freedom is almost always the best way to go. The market will figure it out. And on that happy note, till next week, get out there and make something happen.
This has been the Get Real Podcast. To subscribe and for more information, including a list of all episodes, go to getrealestatesuccess.com.